Hi friends, continuing to the chapter The Born Again. Confederate General and the Connecticut Yankee. Mr. Skeen has related to me that the element of an guidance in his past life research has been so strong that he had felt like the spiritual world has been punishing him around. Like a shopping cart, Jeff's story began in May 1991 when he was on an occasion with his wife Anna. They were looking for an antiques and stopped in an Sharpsburg, Maryland, which was where the Civil War Battle of Antietam was fought. Though Jeff had never read a book of an Civil War or had an affinity for that area, he felt compelled to visit the battlefield. At a portion of a field called a sunken road, Jeff listened to an audio tape narration of event that took place in 1862. The battle involved a regiment called the Sixth Alba, which was commented by a colonel John B. Jordan. After listening to the tape as he walked along the old frame lane, Jeff unknowingly strolled into the area that had been occupied by the Jordan and his men. At this location, Jeffney had the following reaction. A wave of a grief, sadness, and anger washed over me. Without warning, I was suddenly consumed by the sensation. Burning tears rained down my cheeks. I became difficult to breathe. I gasped for the air. As I stood, stand fixed in the old roadbed, to this day I cannot tell you how much time transpired. But as these feelings, this emotion overloaded past, I found myself exhausted as I had to run a marathon. Crawling up the steep, in black mud to get out the road, I turned and looked back. I was a bit shaken to say that, at least, and wondered and what had just taken place. It was a difficulty getting back to the car because I felt so weak. I had regained most of my moral, normal composers on the way back and said nothing to Anna about what had just happened. And could I say, how can I explain it to her? I did not have any answer, just the questions. Before leaving the Sharpsburg, I was about to leave then. Jeff and Anna visited a gift shop, a magazine Civil War Quarterly Special Edition. Caught Jeff's eyes and he purchased it, along with an souvenir bullet found in this area. At home, Jeff placed the magazine in a drawer that held the family phone books, though he did not look at the journal until a year and a half later. In October 1992, Jeff and Anna attended a Halloween party. A clairvoyant named Barbara Campbell has been hired to give a reading at the party. When it was Jeff's turn, his experience at an Shukan Road came up. Barbara told Jeff that he was a soldier then and that he had been shot full of holes at the battlefield. He then had floated above his body, which was lying. Apparently, the lifelines on the bodied ground. Barbara then said that when you are having and hovering over your body, look down. You are very angry at that moment. Jeff corrected Barbara for the reason unknown to him and explained not yet. The next day, Jeff decided it was a time to read the souvenir magazine regarding the battle to Antietam that he had purchased in May 1991. Jeff reflected again that it was the first Civil War magazine that he had even purchased. Jeff opened the journal to the pages that had pictures of an Sukan Road, the spot where Jeff had experienced the strange flood of emotions. As he scanned the text, he saw a quiet, not yet, the hair stood up on the back of his neck. Reading on, Jeff learned that not yet was an order given by the Colonel John B. Gordon to the 6th Alabama. Yankee troops were approaching and the men of 6th Alabama were anxious to the fire. The order to fire was not given until the Union troops were less than 100 yards away. Gordon himself was quieted regarding the encounter. A huge volume of an musketry speeded out from the Sukan road. My rifle's flames unrolled in the Federal faces like a blinking blaze of an lightnings. The effect was appealing. As he read the Jordan passages, Jeff started to experience the same emotion that he had left at Sukan Road, and the tears came to his eyes. Article then described the wounded orphan Jordan. John B. Gordon of 6th Alabama was hit in the left arm, the right shoulders, and twice in the right leg before passing out from a loss of blood after receiving a wound in the face. Jeff himself write off what had happened next. I turned back to the page across from it was another picture. This time a chill ran through me and a hair on my back of my neck stood up again. This picture of an barbarian, General John B. Jordan, the face was not an unknown to me. I know it well. The face was not unknown to me. I know I shave it every morning. Jeff noted that in the Captain Jordan was identified as a general, whereas in the article Jordan was identified as the colonel at the time of his woundings. Jordan apparently had survived the Battle of Almatium. In this book, Jeff described how he later retrieved memories of his lifetime as a John B. Gordon. Jeff also described the habitat and the triads he had in common with the Jordan. These include the performances to stand with the arms crossed, similar closing tastes, and the scar on his face and the body that reflect the Gordon battle wounds. He recounts the two symbolic events. One involved order written by the General Lee on September 9, 1862, which defending the Confederate army planned to invade the North. 9 copies of the orders were made. One copy was lost in a transit and recovered by the Union soldiers. This information gave the Union Army detailed information regarding the position of an Confederate troop and led to the Battle of Antietam. In some orders written on September 9th resulted in the Civil War conflict in which John B. Jordan was severely wounded and almost died. The symbolic event is contemporary times in Jeff Nee's birthday, which is September 9th. Another symbolic event involving the date September 9th occurred on an Jeff Nee 30th birthday. On the day, Jeff was taken to the emergency room to be treated for the facial and the neck pain. Doctors could find no physical causes for Jeff pain syndromes. The location of his pain corresponded to the facial and the neck wound incurred by the John B. Jordan at the war. Jordan was 30 at the time of his injuries. Jeff's facial pains occurred on September 9, 1977, his 13th birthday. His incidents appear to be represent an anniversary phenomenon related to Jordan's wound. Keeping in the mind that the Jeff emergency room visited occurred in 1977, which was 15 years before Jeff became aware of his connection to Jordan. In this book, Jeff included the documents that shows the similarity in the writing style. In his later years, General Jordan wrote a book called as Reminiscences of the Civil War, which provided a material for a Jeff analysis. Let us compare the two passages, one from Gordon book describing the effect of his men to put out a fire of an Wrightville, Pennsylvania, and one from Nee regarding his fire department's responses to an emergency incident. My observation is that the two documents seems to be written in the same voice. At my present, Miriam Pittsburgh, PhD, a linguistic professor at the University of California, Berkeley, conducted a linguistic analysis of these documents, which is provided as an addendum to this chapter. This analysis confirmed that the two passages have definite structural similarities. John Gordon from the reminiscences of the Civil War. With a great energy, my men labored to save the bridge. I call on the citizens of an right valley for the buckets and the bills, but none were to be found. There was no lack of an bucket and a pail a little while later. When the town was on fire, my men labored as earnestly and bravely to save the town as they did to save the bridges. In the absence of an fire engines or the other applications, the only change to arrest the progress of a flame was to form my men around the burning tryst, with the flank resting on the river edges and the pass rapidly from the hand to the hand the pails of water. Thus and thus only was advancing, raising fire made, and at a late hours of an night check and conquered. Assistant Chief Geoffrey Nee, from a letter to the fire chief. With my radio resorted, manpower and apparatus were brought in and put under the guidance of an acting Christopher Ackley. While setting up a plan of an action, Leonard Ackley displayed a good common sense, knowledge, training, and a deep concern of the safety of firefighters under his commands. A large amount of gas entered the structure by a way of an open window. Though we tried to remove all the possible sources of an ignition, we were able to remove all but two. The owners informed us that the house contained an oil-fired furnaces and a hot water heaters. There was no way to shut them off from inside or outside. Using the maturing devices, a positive pressure from and opening and closing windows, hazards are removed. I stated earlier that the people reincarnate in the groups based on an sharp karma, emotional attachment, and the joint projects. Due to the premises of a group incarnation, both Jeff and I suspected that his fellow firefighters in the Westport, Connecticut, the fire department was likely military acquaintance of the John B. Jordan during the Civil War. Subsequently, Jeff has established several matches that found with Jordan. One of these proposed past life pairings, which demonstrate a striking similarity in the physical resemblance, involves a Confederate General Adamus Wilcox and the firefighting van or Zetla. Images comparing the General Wilcox and Zetla can be reviewed next to the image of General Jordan and Geoffrey Nee. In the term of past life memories, Jeff described the three kinds. First, through a series of meditation, Jeff was able to visualize or remember the details of his life as Gordon. Jeff purposely conducted these meditations before he read the reminiscences of the Civil War. He documented these experiences and later was able to confirm the many details through the Gorgon book and the other sources. A second type of memory involves spontaneously knowing the details of the Jordan's life without having learned the information from any other sources. As an example, Jeff toured a visitor center where the artifact of an Confederative surrender ceremony was household. Jordan had practiced it in a specific ceremony and image depicted the setting of the ceremony, complete with a flag used by the Jordan and his fellow confidence officers in surroundings. Jeff knew that a flag in a display was not the flag actually used in the ceremony. Jeff recognized the correct flag from an assorted display at the visitor center. Upon questioning the staff, he verified the flag as displayed was indeed from a later era that the Jeff was identified the authentic flag used in the ceremony. A third type of memory Jeff had experiences can be called an emotional memory, as described in the incidents of Ansukan Road, in which Jeff had the intense emotional reaction when they revisited the scene of an past life Tarunma. Jeffney has reflected that during the Civil War he was general in the South's Confederate Army, yet in his lifetimes. He lived in the North. Jeff had noted that an ancestors of his fought with the Union Army and as such. When he was John B. Jordan, he may have gone to battle again, his own ancestors give us a different perspectives on war. On that, let us see how the wasteful was in this term of lives and resources. I would like to bring these chapters to close with a session taken from the Jeffney books Somewhere Else Yesterday. It has a great importance of our times given the amount of conflict we observe on our planet today. Note that the passages come from someone who was in the past lifetime one of the greatest battlefield generals that the United States had ever produced. Reflects on how an understanding of an reincarnation modifies the characters of an even battlefield horses. Pause for a moment and contemplate what the world would be like in the reincarnation were the proven to be fact of a life. How could we have then treat others? When dealing with a family, friends, or an acquaintance, we would need to ask ourselves some questions like this. Who are those souls? What is their relationship to me? Am I to learn something from them or am I to be their teacher? The possibilities are endless. We all live in the same houses and that houses grows smaller every day. This planet has become a global village. No longer does it take the written word to tell of the event on the other side of the earth. With the flick of switches, we can sit and watch events unfold. Every country affects all others will neither finance, population problems, and petty hostiles. Now more than ever, everyone needs to be changed his way of thinking. No more I but US, no more them but we. We love a mark on ourselves and those around us, so let us strive to see us a gentle touch. Linguistic analysis of John B. Jordan, Jeffrey Nee cases by the Miriam Peterberg, PhD. John Jordan from the resonance of the Civil War. With a greater energy, many men labor to save the bridges. I called on the citizens of an right while for the buckets and the pails, but none were to be found. There was a no lack of buckets and the pails a little while later when the town was on the fire. My men labored as an earnest and bravery to save the town as they did to save the bridge. In the absence of a fire engine or the other appliances, the only change to arrest the program of a plane was to form my men around the burning district, with the flank resting on the river's edges, and pass rapidly from the hand to the hand the pail of water. Thus and thus only was an advancing, raging fire made, and at a late hours of a night check and the conquest. Assistant Chief Jeffrey Keane from a letter of his fire chief. With my radio resorted, manpower and apparatus were brought in and put under the guidance of an acting Christopher Ackley. While setting up a plan of an action, Ackley displayed a good common sense, knowledge, training, and a deep concern for the safety of firefighting under his command. A large amount of gas entered the structure by the way of an open window. Though we tried to remove all the possible sources of ignitions, we are able to remove all but the two. The owner informed us that the house contained an oil-fired furnaces and a hot water heater. There was no way to shut them off from inside or outside. Using the maturing devices, a positive pressure fan and opening a closing window, the hazards was removed. A summary of an linguistic analysis performed by Miriam Peterberg, PhD. Closing the average number of words per sentence, Jordan is 21, Keane is 18. Use of component centers, Jordan. The only change to arrest the progress of a flame was to form my men around the burning district, with the flank resting on the river bed, and passes rapidly from the hand to the hand the pail of water. Nee, while setting up a plan of an action, Lieutenant Ackley displayed a good common sense, knowledge, training, and a deep concern of safety of firefighting under his commands. Use of an preposed clauses is complex sentence. Jordan, in the absence of the fire engine. Nee, while setting up a plan of action. Users often extile the sentences with the negotiation. Good Jordan, there was a lack of an bucket. Nay, there was no way to shut them off. Admirable clauses at the beginning of the sentence. Jordan, with a great energy, in the absence of an fire engines. Nay, with my radio resorted. Most of the text it is active, voices except at the end. In the both passages, paragraph end and in passive voices, and if the success came about without the interventions of those involved. Excitement is achieved by the alternating experted words order, separating the two parts of a verb. Jordan was an advanced rigging fireman and at the late hours of an night checked, unconquered, me using metering devices. The hazard was removed. Note from Dr. Petersburg. Given the similarities already noted, we must nevertheless include a disclaimer about an authorship. More specifically, because the texts were very small and analysis is necessarily limited to the major structural features. Any claim about the authorship is best at the tenets. Further analysis is required to make a stronger claim in this regards. Large sample textures that have not been preselected would facilitate a variety of an frequency test on a different subset of an word. In addition, it would be intensive to examine such text to answer other questions about the substylistic features of the text. For example, do they use a distinctive vocabularies? Do the text employ the rare collations, that is combination of uncommon words? Is there any irregular spellings or an phenotypon of a word or merely generally functional or sentences? Principles of Reincarnation and the work of an Ion Stevenson MD. Karmic souls groups. People appears to come into our life in a groups based on shared karmas and emotional attachments. Couples often come back together and entire family units can reoccur. When an individual reincarnation, the other members of that person's karmic group will be present. Identifying the members of a person karmic group is another important criticism in establishing a past life match. How do we connect with our karmic groups? The answer is, I believe it's destiny. In analyzing the past life cases, I have observed that we all have an predetermined destiny on a life linearity which belongs us, brings us the people. We are supposed to spend time with them. To better understand how the destiny works, I use the analogy of the journey. Think of your life as an extended vacation that you plan in advance. You decide who you want and need to see, where you want to go, and what activities you would like to appreciate in. You coordinate your eternity with the people you are and readiness with you. You and your karmic friends and the loved ones all agree to be planned before you were born. Once you come into the life, the destiny ensures that you meet up with your karmic souls group. The setting for the karmic applications can be our families, work life, and the recreational purist. These settings are the stages on which we play out the karmic dramas of our life. This casts a new light on an Shakespeare's farce. All of life is but a stage. We meet up with different karmic groups at a different point in the life. When we get the urge to take a new job, travels to a new city, or take up a new reincarnation purist, many times this is a part of our destiny being played out. New venues bring us to the karmic group we need to be with. If this is true, one must question whether we have a free will. My belief is that though we all have a predetermined linearity that we are committed to honor, we have free will in what we do all the way. Indeed, growth and a human evolution could not occur without a free will. Some peoples may have a more structural eternity that the limits diversity tricks, while the others may have a less structured game plan. Either way, we have a free will along our designated paths. Karmic group provides insights regarding a deja vu experiences if we meet up the people we known in the past lives. It is not surprising that we may have a spark of an recognition when we meet. Since people have a consistent patterns of behavior, we may recognize these trials and the ideogenetic reactions when situation recur. Finally, deja vu may occur if we recognize an event that it is a part of an eternity. We may become aware of an rock mark along our predetermined path. Path life symbols, synchronic events, and the anniversary phenomena. A common features in the past life research is that a symbol for a prior lifetime or found in a person's contemporary incarnation and synchronistic events occurs when seems to reinforce the past life connections. In my own cases, many coincidental events occurred which seems to correlate to a past lifetime to mine as the John Adams, a leader of an American Revolution in Boston. For example, the first time I spoke in a public about my past lifetime was at the Publish House in Massachusetts, built in 1771, in a room filled with an revolutionary paraphernalia. The graphics pertain to the reincarnation cases of an Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Al Gore, and myself were hand delivered to the President Clinton, then in the office and at the White House on John Adams' birthday. Almost magically, without realizing it, I also signed my book contract of the return of an revolutionaries on John Adams' birthday and became aware of an synchronic singing until the following days. Attraction to the specific geographical locations. Individuals are often attracted to the geographical settings of a past life. In many cases, peoples are observed to the gravitate to the places where they have lived before. Individual may reside in this area often visit own halls on the vacation. In some cases, it appears that the soul is simply nostalgic for the familiar settings. In other cases, the souls may direct the individual to a specific place to trigger an remembrance of a past lifetime or to facilitate a spiritual awakening. The cases of an Robert Snow and Jeffrey Nee illustrate how guidelines to the geographic location can lead to the revolution regarding the past life. Memories. Memories of a past life can be profound effect on the individual who had experienced them. Memories can occur spontaneously or through a past life regressions. In a regressions, a therapist guides a person into a stage of an deep relaxation. The subject is coached to go back in a life until the former lives as experienced or remembered. Memories, whether the spontaneous or experienced through the regressions or subjective. Alone, those memories only weak evidences of an reincarnation, those who have not experienced them. Memories, though, when supported by the objective facts obtained through the historical research and the corroboration, provide compelling evidences of an reincarnation. Even Stevenson, MD, a physiotherapist at the University of Virginia, has compiled and studied the thousands of cases involving the children who remember the past life in detail. In his work, Dr. Stevenson traveled to the scenes of the contemporary and the past times. To verify the detail provided in the past life accounts, two cases that the Dr. Stevenson have researched. which demonstrate that the facial features remains constant from the one incarnation to the another, and presented below. Before we review these causes, I would like to address two very common questions that are raised regarding the reincarnations. In reincarnation is real, then if reincarnation is real, then how can the population be so much larger now? If the doctrine of an reincarnation is true, how can there be so many more people on the planet today than in the past? The easiest way to address this issue is simply frequency of incarnation. In the past, when the population on the earth was much smaller, then perhaps the soul could have only incarnate one in a few hundred years. With today's population, souls can be incarnate much more frequently, almost continuously. Why is everyone famous in a past lifetime? In the truth, most of the peoples were not famous in usual, in the prior lifetimes, though the famous people do not have to reincarnate like everyone else. It is a true that the souls who have made a great impact in a prior lifetime do tends to make a magnificent impact in a subsequent lifetimes, as these souls brings and earn skills with them from one incarnation to the another. This is demonstrated by the reincarnation cases involved Picasso, APJ Abdul Kalam, Vikram Sabari, Shah Rukh Khan, Rekha, Amitabh, and Jaya Bachchan. Individuals can mistakenly believe that they were someone famous in the past lifetime for two reasons. One, they may have known a famous person in the past lifetime, and in trying to ascertain a past life identity, they confuse the famous person for their own true past life identity. For example, instead of being Cleopatra, one may have been an Cleopatra advisor or a friend. I call this type of an mistaken matches landmark cases. In this, famous person acts as a landmark for an person incarnation in a place and a time. Mistakes can also be made because a famous person may be acting as a guide to a person. We all have spirit guides that try to help us in our lives. Decade relatives and people who have had close relationship within a past lives can serve as a spirit guides. Sometimes people can confess a spirit guide for their own past incarnation. For example, a person may have been an assistant to Leonardo da Vinci in his art studio, and in a contemporary incarnation, Leonardo serves this person as an spirit guide. This person pursues a career in an art and this time gets an inspiration from the Leonardo, who is coaching the person from the other side. The person that starts to believe that he indeed was an Leonardo da Vinci in a past lifetime, though it is reality Leonardo is servicing as a spirit guide. With these issues clarified, let us now examine the reincarnation cases that involve the spontaneous memories in the childhood. The reincarnation research on an Ian Stevenson MD. In his career, Dr. Stevenson served as a chairman of a department of an psychiatry at the University of Virginia, the School of Medicine. And he had also honored as an Clarkson Professor of an psychiatry at that institution. For 30 years, Dr. Stevenson investigated the children who remembered the past life. Most of these cases come from Asia, India, or other areas where the doctrine of an reincarnation is accepted. In the location where the incarnation is not an accepted belief system, it is though that the parents inhabited a child's expression of an past life memories. The childhood cases studies by the Ivan Stevenson have a common pattern, marked by the following features. As soon as the child can communicate, the child starts to describe a previous lifetime. Often, the child declares that his or her name is different than the name given to the child by its biological parents. The child insists that the current family is not his true family, but that is his or her real family lives in a different village or the town. The child typically remembers the names of various family members from the past lifetimes. Physical features of the houses and the neighborhood in which the child lived during the prior lifetime may be recalled. The child remembers the details of its death in the prior lifetime. In approximately 50% of a Dr. Stevenson reincarnation cases, a violent or a premature death occurred in a previous lifetime. Dr. Stevenson had found that an individual who died of an traumatic wounds such as a bullet or a knife wound often are born in an subsequent incarnation with the scars that the mirror that wound in acquired in the previous lifetime. In the temporary lifetime, the child often has an phobia related to the cause of a death in the prior lifetime. The child's family from the prior incarnation is eventually identified. When the child meets his family for the first time, the child is able to identify the family members by the name or by relationship. The child often knows a family secret that the only members of a prior family would know. As a result, the family from the prior lifetime often accept the child as the reincarnation of their deceased relatives. The biological parents of a child in the current incarnation often fears that the child will leave them for the family from the prior lifetime, as the mutual bond between the child and the prior families belongs so strong. These fears turn out to be an unwarranted, as that the bond between the child and the contemporary parents endures. A long-term relationship, though, typically ensures between the child and the family from the prior lifetime. Personality triads, persons, performances, preferences, and the habit often persist from one incarnation to the another. Physical appearance is reported to be similar in a number of cases. In 95% of Dr. Stevenson cases, the child's return amusing the same sex as in the prior lifetime. Thus, in 5% of the cases, gender is received from one lifetime to the another. In 1998, Dr. Stevenson revisited the cases he finds investigated 20 years ago. In two of these cases, photographs of an individual from the prior lifetime were available. These images shows that in a maturity, physical appearances is a constituent from the lifetime to the lifetime. Let us review those two cases which happens to have originated in the Lebanon and are summarized in a book about Dr. Stevenson called The Old Souls by the Tom Schroeder. The case of an Hagan monster, Souza Ghanem. Hannah was born in Lebanon in the midst of 1930s. When she was 20, Hannah married a Farouk Monson, a member of a well-to-the Lebanon's family. The couple had two daughters named Leila and Glaria. Hannah had a brother named Nabi, who became prominent in an Lebanon society but died as a young man in a plane crash. After having her second daughter, Hannah developed a heart problem and her doctor advised her not to have any more children. Not heeding the warning, Hannah had a third child, a son, in 1962. In 1963, shortly after the death of her brother Nahib, Hannah's health started to deteriorate. Hannah then started to talk about dying. Farooq Khan's husband said that Hannah told him that she was going to be reincarnated and have lots to say about her previous life. This was 2 years before her death. At the age of 36, Hannah traveled to Richmond, Virginia to have a heart surgery. Hannah tried to telephone her daughter Leah before the operation but couldn't get through. Hannah died of a complication the day after the surgery. 10 days after the Hannah's died, Suzanne G-Man was born. Suzanne's mother told that Yvonne Stevenson that shortly became Suzanne Bird. I dreamed I was going to have a baby girl. I met a woman and I kissed and hugged her. She said, I'm going to come to you. The woman was about 40. Later, when I was Hannah's pictures, I thought it looked like the woman in my dream. In other words, Susanna Gani, mothers had a dream that she would have a child that had the appearances of an Hannah monster, and these dreams became a reality. At the 16th month of an age, Susanna pulled the phone off the hook as if she was trying to talk it into it and said over and over, "Hello, Leela." The family didn't know who his Leela was. When she got older, Susina explained that Leela was one of her children and that she was not Susina but Hannah. The family asked, Hannah what? Susina replied, my head is still small. Wait until it is bigger, and it might tell you. By the time she was 2, she had mentioned the name of her other children and her husband Farouk, and the names of her parents and her brother from the previous lifetime. 30 names all in one. In trying to locate the Suzanne's past life family, acquaintance of an Jasons made enquiries in the town where the Monsuras lived. When they heard about the cases, the Monsuras visited Suzanne. The Monsuras was initially skeptical about the children's claim. They became the believers when Suzanne identified of all the Hannah's relatives, picking them out and naming them accurately. Suzanne also knew that Hannah has given her a jewel to her brother Hurdles in Virginia prior to the heart surgery, and that the Hannah instructed her brother to divide the jewelry among her daughters. No one outside of a Monsor family knew about the jewel. Before she could read or write, Susina scribbled a phone number on a piece of a paper. Later, when the family went on and Moshe's home, they found that the phone number matched the Monser's number, except that the last 2-digit number was transported. As a child, Susina could retrieve the origination spoken at the funeral of Hannah's brother, Nahib. Susina family tapped the recitation through the tape was eventually lost. At the 5 years of an age, Susina would fall the Farouk 3 times a day. When Susina visited Farouk, she would sit on his lap and rest her head against his chest. At 25 years of an age, Susina still telephoned Farouk. Farouk, a career policeman, has accepted Susina as a reincarnation of his deceased wife Hannah. To support his conclusion, Farouk pointed out that from the photograph, Susina accurately picked out and score of a people they had been acquainted with, and knew the other information that only Hannah would have known. The case of Rashid Caddy, Daniel Jurdi. Rashid Caddy was an auto mechanical who lived in a town named as Farmatha in Lebanon. Rashid was born in 1943. When he was 25, a friend named Ibrahim picked him up to go to a car ride. Ibrahim stepped towards the Mediterranean Sea and at a place called a military beach lost control of a car. Rashid was thrown from the vehicle, incurred head trauma and was instantly killed. Once a year later, Daniel Jurdi was born. Daniel's earliest word was Ibrahim. At the age of 2, he told his mother, Latifa, I want to go home. At 2.5, Daniel made the statement, this is not my house. You're not my mother. I don't have a father. My father died. Daniel's mother recalled. He could not call Yusuf daddy. He called him by his name. Further, Daniel said, my father's name is Naim. Naim was Rashid Khadiba's father. At 2.5 years of an age, at a family picnic, a relative tried to pronounce the name of a town, Karifmata. Daniel interviewed and correctly pronounced the name of the town. When his father asked how he knew the name of a town, Daniel replied, I am from Karfata. When Daniel and his mother were driving in a Burot, they passed a place on a sea called the Military Beach. Daniel shut his eyes, hiding himself with his hand and started crying. Then he screamed, this is where I died. Daniel also related that in his prior lifetime he was mechanic. Regarding the accident, Daniel said that Ibrahim was speeding and lost the control of a car. Daniel said that I flew out of a car and landed on my head. When the help came to assist the injured, Daniel said that he heard someone says, leave this one, he is dead. In the nursery school, Daniel told the teacher his name was Rashid. In other incidents, at the nursery school, little Daniel pitched an attractive young teacher and made a suggestive remark. Eventually, Daniel's father sent to an Antiguans to a Khalifa to inquire about someone fitting the Daniel description of an mechanic who died in an auto accident at Military Beach. The Khatijas heard about the story and visited Daniel. Stephen interviewed the two families in 1979, both said upon their initial meetings. Daniel instantly recognized Rashid's sister, Najila, and called her by the name. When the families met, Daniel told his mother to bring the bananas for the guest. Rashid loved bananas, and his mother and sister stopped eating bananas after his death because bananas reminded them of their loss of Rashid. Later on, during a visit of an Karfmata, Daniel also spontaneously recognized Ibrahim as well as Jijat, Razim's haunting buddy. Rashid's family has accepted Daniel as a son from a previous lifetime. They have a picture of him at the home and keep a bed for Daniel, who visit 1 or 2 months a month. Daniel has married and worked as an accountant. Daniel has a phobia of raising cars, which apparently reflects the psychological trauma incurred by the Rashid in a crash at a military beach. Dr. Stevenson has studied almost 3,000 cases in which the children are reported to remember the past life. Dr. Stevenson has stringent criteria for considering the cases valid, and of 3,000 cases that he has examined, and 1,000 meet his criteria for being authentic. Though the Dr. Stevenson did not focus on physical reimbalances in the early years of his researches, the cases of Susina Graham, Daniel Jurdi, and others have made his revise his approach. Hannah Monser and Susina Ganem have the same facial architecture, the same facial features. Rashid Khari and Daniel Jurdi also share the same facial features. An image comparing the Khatija and Jurdi is provided at the end of this chapter. To view the facial architecture shapes by Hannah Monser and Susina Gihan, please refer to The Old South by the Tom Suder. In this book, where the biology and the reincarnation insist, Dr. Stevenson recommended that the future researcher systematically study the facial resemblance between the subject and the previous personalities. Dr. Stevenson is a pioneer in the scientific research of an reincarnation. His work, 20 Cases Suggestives of an Reincarnation, first published in 1966, is a classic. In fact, I submit that anyone who reads the 20 cases with an open mind will develop a belief in an reincarnation. The reincarnation of an Annie Frank. One of the most culturally significant reincarnation cases involves Barbo Carlin, with whom I have conducted joint presentation over the years. I first met Barbo in 2000 and I was considered her a good friend. I have heard her story many times and I would like to share it with you at this time. Annie Frank died in Belsen, Bergen concentration camp in 1945. Less than 10 years later, in 1954, Barbaro Kalin was born to a Christian family parents in Sweden. When she was less than 3 years old, Barbaro told her parents that her name was not Barbaro, but Annie Frank. Barbaro parents had no idea of what Annie Frank was, as a book of Annie Frank, Diary of an Young Girl, also known as Diary of an Annie Frank, has not yet been published in Sweden. Barbaro relates that they wanted her to call them Ma and Pa, but Barbaro knew that they were not her real parents. Barbaro even told her mother that her real parents would soon come to get her and take her home. During her childhood, Barbaro told her parents details of her life as Annie, which her parents thought were fantastic. Barbaro also had nightmares as a child in which men ran up the stairs and kicked in the door to a family attic, hiding the places. Barbaro had a fear of a man in uniform and aversions to a being with which the Frank families excited on for nearly 2 years, and she would only take baths, not showers. Barbaro memories concerned her parents, and at one point they had her evaluated by a psychiatrist. Barbaro thought that had by this time learned that it was not wise to talk about the other world she lived in, the world of Annie Frank, as she noticed that everyone got tense when she described her memories to them. When she saw the psychiatrist, she made no mention of her memories of being. Annie was deemed a perfect, normal little girl. When Barbara was a little older, she became confused when her school teacher began talking about Annie Frank in the class. How could her teachers know about Annie Frank? Further, Barbero began to realize that Annie Frank was an well known person. How could that be? As Barbero later in her life, for her as a child, all this didn't work for me. Imagine how hard it must be have been from Barbero to have all these spontaneous memories and have no one to talk about them. No one like Carol Bowman, who could help her with her confusion and the nightmares. Barbero received her first validation of being Annie Frank when she was 10 years old, which she describes in her book, And the Wolves Overwhelmed. I will paraphrase the scene. When she was 10, Barbero parents looked onto her tour of an major cities in Europe. One destination was an Amsterdam, the city where the Frank family lived. During the World War II, Otto Frank and his family had to go within hiding in the attic of an building where Otto has been his business because the Nazi had invaded the Netherlands and were prejudging the Jews. The Frank family hid in their attic for about 2 years until they were discovered by Nazis, arrested and sent to the concentration camp. The only survivor was the father, Otto Frank, who subsequently found the diary of his daughter Annie, which he later had it published. After the war, the hiding places was made into a museum and called the Annie Frank Home. By the time Barbero was 10, the diary of an Annie Frank has been published, and while in the Amsterdam, her father wanted to visit the Frank house. At the hotel, he took the phone off the hook and asked for a taxi to take them her. Barbero suddenly explained, "We don't need a taxi. It is not far to walk from here." Barbero was so dead certain that it didn't occur to her parents to object. They just meekly followed her as she walked off. "Well, soon be there. It is just around the next corner," Barbero said. She herself wasn't at all surprised when she arrived at Annie Frank house after a 10 minutes walk through the winding street of Amsterdam. But her parents stood her speechless and just looked at one another. "That's strange," Barbero said. When she stood in the front step of an house, "I didn't look like this before." She looked wondering, and her parents didn't know what to say. They entered the house and went up the narrow staircase. Barbero, who had been so carefree when showing them the way, suddenly went quite white in the face. She broke out into a cold sweat and reached for her mother's hand. Her mother was quite horrified when she felt Barbero's hand, which was as cold as ice. When they entered the building place, the same irritational terror overcame Barbero as she has experienced so many times in her dreams. She found that it is hard to breathe and panic spread throughout her body. When they went into one of the smaller rooms, she suddenly stood still and brightened up a little. Barbero looked at the wall in the front of her and exclaimed, "Look, the pictures of our film stars are still there. The pictures of a movie stars that the Andy have clipped and affixed to the wall," which the Barbero saw at the moment, made her feel happy, almost as if she had come home. Her mother started at the blank wall and couldn't understand this at all. "What pictures? The wall is bare." Barbero looked again and she saw that this was true. The wall was bare. Her mother was so confused that she felt driven to ask one of the guides whether she knew if there has been a pictures on the wall at once. "Oh yes," one guide replied. "They have only been taken down temporarily to be mounted under the glass so that they wouldn't be destroyed or stolen." Barbero mother didn't know what to say. How in the world could you find your way here first of all, then insert the step outside and were different, and then see the pictures on the wall when they weren't there? Barbero mother was full of questions and really quite irritated. But Barbero was quite incapable of saying even a single word. She just wanted to get out of there. She couldn't stand it in a moment longer. Her legs felt like jelly as she went down the stairs. She had never before in her life felt so wretched. The tears ran and recently down her face, and her legs would not carry her. When she reached the bottom steps, her leg folded under her and she fell. In this passage, paralyzed us from and the wolves howled. Barbero related this incident that finally made her parent believe that she is an reincarnation of an Annie Frank. After all, how else could she know how to get to the Annie Frank house on a family's first trip to Amsterdam and without the direction? How could she know the stairs has been modified or that the pictures of a movie's star that the Annie Frank has affixed should be found on a wall when the pictures has been removed for mounting? Barbero's mother responded by becoming a very spiritual and a believer in an reincarnation. Barbero's father, on the other hand, seems annoyed. Barbero related that her father responded by saying, I can't deny that you have somehow been here before. Perhaps you have lived before and have reincarnated, but you are the only one. Barbero understands that being faced with the possibility reality of an reincarnation, the happenings of the day upsets her father. Christian. Christian's worldwide view, where everything was said right. Barbero was much happier though from this point on, as she could now talk to her mother about her lifetimes as an Annie Frank, and she had her mother's support. Like Annie Frank, Barbero Carlin was a childhood write prodigy. Barbero retells that the learning to write was a great gift, and when she could not speak to anyone about her life pastime memories, once she learned to scribe, she could have a discourage with her writing table. What when she was 11 or so, the family friends read Barbero notes to herself and realized that this was a worthy prose. Barbero was asked if her casual writing could be complicated, which she agreed to, and at the age of 12, her first book of prose was published. This book, The Man on the Earth, became the best-selling prose poetry in the Swedish history. Barbero became a little celebrity, debated theology with the ministers and the theologian on the television programs. After her adolescence passed, her past life memories began to fade, which was a relief to Barbero, and as of now, she could finally lead a normal life. It was not until she was in her 40s that the memories began to emerge again, as described in her book. Until this time, Barbero never thought that she would write about her memories of being Annie Frank. But as in Barbero witfully one commented in an interview, never say never. After her book came out, she received a great deal of an attention in Europe. On an institution, she described to move to California, where I was fortunate to meet this great soul. When I first received a phone call in 2000s in which I was told that a woman claimed to be an reincarnation of an Annie Frank, I was doubtful. I met her though with her husband Stephen, and I came to realize that I had truly met the incarnation of an Annie Frank. Spiritually and a love of nature. Lawrence N. Langer in the Annie Frank reflection on her life and legacy writes the following regarding Annie. Spiritual insights rarely falls from the lips of an 13 or 14 years old girl. Indeed, as many as the new entries in the diaries will show. Annie Frank was essentially a physical being, a lover of a nature integrated with her own sexuality. Those triad are reflected in the Barbero Carlin, who was 16 years of age, moved to a cottage in the woods, along with her horse, 2 dogs, 2 cats, a sheep, and a flock of hens and chicks. Barbero especially loved her horse and a horseback riding, which eventually led to her pursuing a career as a mountain policewoman. Her sexuality is evident by an earlier marriage and the pregnancy by the age 18. Indeed, many of Annie's desires seems to have come to an fruition early in the life of an Barbero Carlin. Barbero spiritually is linked to the nature. In her books, she described a childhood encounter with the god while completing the footprints of an sandy beach. The name she gave God at the moment was the Wanderer, Barbero demonstrated, as did the Annie, the qualities of an old soul at the young age. Natural literacy skills. Despite her lacking of an training, Annie Frank has become recognized as an gifted writer. Similarly, Barbara Carlin was a childhood literacy prodigy. Her first book was published at 12 years of an age and became the all-time best-selling poetry book in Sweden. Between the ages 12 and 17, 9 books written by Barbero were published. It is interesting to note that the Annie Frank always hoped to be published writer. On May 11, 1944, Annie wrote that her gesture wish was to become a journalist and later on a famous writer. Once again, it is appear that the Annie's desire were fulfilled early in the life of Barbero. Similar themes are found in the writings of Ed Frank and Crallen. Though one may argue that these similarities are identical, Barbero Carlin maintains that she has not studied Annie Frank's work. Annie Frank's duty and perceptions of an Jewish by the Nazis reflected extensively on the issue of an good and evil. She also have an tendency to personify the human qualities as seen in the quotation cited below regarding the lies. Annie Lacy is based on her ability to maintain the hope in the face of an dimensional circumstances. Despite the perceptions and the suffering endured, Annie Frank, most famous quote, affirms the basic goodness of a man.